Hello, this is Nick Stachokas, Student Service Improvement Specialist here at CSI. This is New Leader Orientation, specifically focused on considering a preschool. At the corner of each slide within this presentation, there will be a little speaker emblem, or symbol I should say, that you can click on and get audio with each slide. I wanted to start today's presentation by just highlighting this statistic that Colorado is lacking licensed care for about 93,000 of 244,000 young children being raised by two working parents or a working single parent. So there is a high demand for childcare across the state of Colorado. And if you're not necessarily approved for a preschool just yet, to go through the proper processes working with our legal and policy team to make sure that your charter gets expanded to include a preschool. It's a lot of just kind of contract modifications and making sure that we have all of the things in place to make sure that you're approved for that preschool specifically. Once the contract has been worked out, there's two initial steps that you have to work through to get your preschool. The first is to acquire a child care license through the Office of Early Childhood in the Colorado Department of Human Services. A directory provided by CDHS identifies whom to contact and the supporting agencies according to county, since supports and services are funneled through the local county where the preschool resides. So that's the first thing. Acquire a child care license through CDHS. The next one, once a school has their child care license, they can then begin the rating process with Colorado Shines, which is Colorado's early childhood quality rating and improvement system. So first, get your child care license, and then second, get your rating. Granted, both of those processes take some time. So make sure that if you're thinking about opening a preschool before a school year or during a certain time period, that you give yourself quite a amount of leeway to make sure that your space is set out for it, and also that you have enough time to make sure that all of the licensing and all of the other things such as the rating, that you have time to make sure that that stuff can take place. The next part of the presentation, I just want to highlight all of the considerations if you're moving forward or before you've decided to actually move forward with the preschool. I just want to highlight things to think about before you get to the final decision. So what are your community needs? So here are some questions to think about when you're thinking about your community needs for a preschool. Does your community have a need for a preschool? So if you were to open one, could you find students to come in there? What have you used to gauge that need? Have you used parent surveys in the community? Have you used county data? Have you talked to county representatives? Staff surveys possibly have a lot of people on staff that have children that need childcare, and then any other district of residence data around preschool. And then finally, have you established any contacts with your local county human services to talk with them to find out what is the need in your community around preschool? The second consideration outside of the community needs and demand is facility. How much space will you need to match your demand for students? Where is the best place to locate the facility? Is it going to be attached to your school? Is it in another place? What is the facility going to look like and where is it? And then finally, what would you have to alter in your current facility for it to meet the early childhood regulations? There are a lot of regulations around early childhood spaces. That includes playgrounds and classrooms. So it's one of those things that you want to explore before you move forward with a preschool, because sometimes the cost with converting certain spaces is quite exorbitant. So you just want to make sure that you have all of the things you need and you've gone through the financial implications of these decisions prior to moving forward with a preschool. So we have community needs, facility questions and considerations, and then financial considerations. How will the preschool facility be paid for? How much will families be paying in tuition if you decide to do tuition? And then what's the market rate in your community? Running preschools oftentimes is a very tricky financial endeavor. So it's one of those things that you want to make sure that you have all of those things laid out before you move forward with the process. In addition, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things around finances for preschools specifically. Funds need to be separate between the preschool and the K-12, although, which is kind of interesting, is that some K-12 title funds can be used in a supplemental manner for specific allowable uses in preschool. So there is some leeway with using title money specifically for preschool, but it's typically not that much money and it's very difficult to rely on. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then when we're thinking about the processes that you're going to use moving forward with oversight of your preschool and financial record keeping, you just want to make sure that your finances are separate between your preschool and your K-12. Enrollment. If you are opening a preschool, there are a couple of things to consider around enrollment. If you receive certain federal grants, specifically CSP is one that often stands out, there are many guidelines around what enrollment needs to look like for preschools in your school if you receive that grant. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's a lot of different kind of separate regulations for it. So you just want to keep that in mind moving forward if you do have that grant and you do want to open up a preschool. And then finally, what are the parameters you're going to set for preschool enrollment into your kindergarten if that's what your plan is? What are the lottery considerations for that? When are the timelines for your enrollment going to start for preschool? And how will you make sure that your preschool students get enrollment into your kindergarten? And how do you want to make sure that that's an equitable process for everyone involved? These are just some considerations when we're opening a preschool. So on the operations side of operating a preschool, there's just a couple things to keep in mind for preschool specifically. And the first, staffing. How will you find qualified staff and handle staff turnover? Preschool teacher turnover ranges from 17% to 40% depending on the area in Colorado. So it is something to keep in mind that it does require a lot of leadership oversight because of the high turnover in staffing for preschool specifically. And then the other thing is that the regulations around professional development in order to make sure that you maintain your Colorado Shines rating is that it's a pretty ongoing process. So how will we make sure that the staff continues to have time set out, that they're meeting the professional development requirements set aside by a lot of the regulations for CDHS and the Colorado Shines process? I also just wanted to highlight that preschools have oversight by several different governing bodies, which is a little bit different than your K-12 programs. Because K-12 is overseen by the Colorado Department of Education, but preschool falls into this really unique place where Colorado Department of Human Services provides some oversight, Colorado Department of Education provides a little oversight, and each county human services, depending on how you're receiving funds, also has some oversight within the processes. So it's just something to highlight that there are a couple different governing bodies for oversight for preschool programs. I also wanted to just pull out this slide. This is the specific thing that Colorado Shines looks into, the different categories that Colorado Shines looks into in order to give your rating of your preschool. And there's many different things that are involved in each of these subcategories, but I just wanted to highlight all of those. Here at CSI, we do get a good amount of questions around the Colorado preschool program. CPP is a state-funded early childhood education program administered by CDE to provide opportunities for young children who are at risk for starting elementary school unprepared. CPP has specific requirements regarding licensing, class size and ratios, service hour requirements, program quality criteria, assessment, staff development, family involvement, support services, and program evaluation that should be considered when deciding to become a participating member. You can have a preschool as a CSI school that's not part of CPP, but often schools will think about joining CPP because there is a financial incentive sometimes to be a participant. However, there are a lot of different things that go into CPP. If a preschool or a school wishes to have their preschool participate in CPP, there's a couple parts in the process, a couple steps in the process. First, once a preschool has been approved and have their child care license and their Colorado Shines rating, the school will need to apply to become part of the CPP program through the CSI District Advisory Council's request for proposal process. For a copy of the RFP RFP, please contact CSI. Now that RFP goes out every fall, and the deadline for submission is usually in early spring, late winter, right around March. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as your timeline. Once the council gets your RFP, the council will then vote on the application. Once a school is approved, the school becomes a participating member of the District Advisory Council. The school will then receive CPP allocations the following year according to the council's slot allocation formula. So the council is the oversight body for the CPP allocations, and it's made up of the participating schools that are part of the CPP program. And just to reiterate that last point, CPP or e-care governance, CSI is required to have a district advisory council made up of participating CPP schools within the portfolio. This group provides the oversight for the CPP programs at CSI schools. So one thing to keep in mind that often schools struggle with is that CPP requires a ratio of 16:1. So will the ratio of 16 students in your classroom be financially feasible for your program? Do you have enough students that meet the eligibility requirements as well? So the eligibility requirements are quite extensive for CPP, although not very difficult. If students are English language learners in preschool, if they qualify for free and reduced lunch, those are eligibility factors that would make a student qualify for a CPP allocation. However, these are two big considerations for your school program when you're trying to evaluate whether CPP is a good fit. Can I make this financially viable with this type of ratio for CPP and some of the requirements around it? And will I have enough students in my community that will meet the eligibility requirements? And I just wanted to post my contact information around this. If there's any questions that you have around preschool, opening a preschool, or CPP, please feel free to call. There's many more resources out there available. It's just that I wanted to give a quick overview for this presentation specifically.